June 8, 1944, Hill 192, Normandy, France. The first shell didn't scream, it hissed. Private Mason Rourke flinched as the hot blast kicked dirt into his mouth, the metallic tang of earth and cordite mixing as he flattened against the smoking trench wall. The second shell came closer, too close, slamming into the sandbags above and vaporizing half a Browning team. Jesus Christ, someone shouted, maybe Andrews, maybe not, hard to tell under the thunder. In a matter of 13 minutes, the 2nd Battalion's forward observation post had gone from a sleepy overlook to a crater-ridden death trap. The Germans were counterattacking fast, faster than anyone had guessed, and now Hill 192, the high ground east of Saint-Lô, was in danger of falling back into their hands. What was supposed to be an anchor became a noose. Rourke's .30 caliber machine gun, a water-cooled M1917 that looked like it belonged in the last war, sat dead cold. He hadn't dared fire yet. The barrels were limited, the water can dry, and they'd been told to hold until resupply by noon. But it was 10:27 a.m., and the resupply convoy was missing. Worse, the radio had gone silent 15 minutes ago when mortar shrapnel took out the antenna and the sergeant holding the handset. So when the first shadows moved just beyond the tree line, gray coats, rifles at the hip, their silhouettes barely visible in the fog, Rourke didn't wait. He squeezed the trigger. The .30 cal erupted like a demon coughing its lungs out. Tracers arced into the tree line. The M1917 wasn't like the lighter air-cooled Brownings. It had a slow, deliberate rhythm. Thunk, 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 thunk. Solid, mechanical, but deadly. And the Germans weren't expecting it. They hit the ground, scrambling, but it was too late for some. Rourke adjusted, sweeping the field just above the grassline. His ammo loader, Private Swales, was already feeding the belt, his fingers black with oil and blood. "How many belts?" Rourke barked. "3. That was 750 rounds, give or take. He'd burn through that in 2 minutes. The trees exploded. Return fire. MG-42s, fast, screaming. A wall of lead forced the Americans lower into the trench. Someone yelped, crawling backward with a leg wound, sobbing as blood soaked through his boot. But Rourke didn't stop. His world narrowed to the grip, the trigger, the stuttering rhythm of the gun, and the cooling jacket that was now beginning to steam. "Water's boiling," Swales shouted, panicking. "Good, means it's working." A shell landed just past the trench lip short. Dirt and roots rained down, then another. And then suddenly nothing. Silence. No fire from the trees. No mortars. Just wind. Rourke's ears rang. The gun's barrel hissed, glowing faintly. He cracked his neck and looked up, blinking through sweat and dust. Swales was shaking. "They're flanking, I swear." I saw M move to the right. Rourke peeked up, he saw it too. And now it hit him. They weren't attacking head-on. They were probing, testing, trying to find the weak link in the line before sending in the bulk of their force. They'd found it, him. His squad was down to 6 men, 2 wounded, 1 barely conscious. The platoon next to them, no contact in 20 minutes, either dead or gone. He reached into the ammo crate, empty. "Swales, get me belts, I don't care where, that tent, that jeep, take it off a corpse." Swales stared at him, horrified. "Sir." "I'm not a sir. I'm a mad bastard with a gun and no backup, so get the damn ammo." Swales ran, disappearing through the broken trench maze. Rourke stood up, full body exposed, and screamed at the trees. "Come on then, I'm right here." It worked. 3 rifle shots zipped past him. He ducked, laughing like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had, but better mad than dead. He yanked the water jacket open. Steam hit his face like a slap. He needed to cool it fast. No coolant left. He looked around, saw a canteen. Unscrewed it. poured it in. The gun hissed and sputtered, metal clanking, as steam blasted out the jacket's seams. He didn't know if it would hold. He didn't care. He just needed to keep firing. Swales returned, dragging a bloodied ammo tin. Got one from the medic station, had to crawl. Rourke grinned like the devil himself. You're beautiful, you know that. He fed the belt. The gun roared to life again. The Germans had circled wide now. He saw them trying to crest the flank hill, maybe 20 men. Close, too close. Rourke adjusted. Fired in bursts, shorter now to keep the gun alive, but accurate, controlled. Men fell. But they kept coming. The barrel began to warp slightly at first, then more. The cooling jacket rattled, bubbling from inside. Every time he fired, it spat steam and oil like a locomotive. She's melting, Swales shouted. Let her, Rourke growled, laying into the trigger again. The next minutes blurred. He remembered firing at a man so close, he saw his expression twist. He remembered tossing the last water into the jacket, Swales' own canteen. He remembered the smell, burning oil, hot brass, blood, and mud, all mixing into something that made his nose bleed. And then darkness. He collapsed. When he woke, it was dusk. An American flag fluttered above the trench line. And the Germans were gone. A medic leaned over him. You insane son of a bitch, he muttered. They radioed. Said someone on Hill 192 had a demon gun. The whole push fell back thinking you had a battalion behind you. Rourke blinked. He tried to speak. Only smoke came out. Rourke didn't speak for 2 days. The medics said it was shock. Others said he'd burst his own voice trying to scream through the roar of a red-hot barrel. But the truth was simpler than that. He was listening. Listening for that sound. That slow, mechanical stutter of the M1917. The rhythm that had become his heartbeat in the inferno on Hill 192. But now there was only the hum of generators, the click of stretchers, the gentle murmurs of nurses moving between rows of cots in the aid station set up inside a captured barn. A nurse named Helen. He never caught her last name, dabbed his face with a wet cloth, and every time the cool water hit his temple, he saw steam rising again from the gun. The weapon was gone. It hadn't exploded, it hadn't shattered, it had just melted. The outer jacket warped like taffy, the barrel slumped from the mount, drooping like it was tired too. The M1917 had fired until it couldn't anymore, and even then Rourke hadn't stopped. Someone had to drag him off the thing. He blinked slowly now, eyes adjusting to daylight. The barn doors creaked open. A silhouette stepped in, broad shoulders, officer's cap. Captain Milner. Infantry, 2nd Battalion, known for a sharp jaw and sharper discipline. Private Mason Rourke, the man asked, though he clearly already knew. Rourke gave a tired nod. Milner held something in his hand, a metal cylinder, charred at the edges. Rourke recognized it instantly, the cooling jacket or what was left of it. They said you poured canteen water in, Milner said, then urine, then mud. Rourke cracked a smile, his voice rasped out, barely audible. Whatever kept it talking. Milner sat. They're calling it the last stand of Hill 192. Radio intercepts say the Germans thought the Americans had a new weapon, called it a devil drum. One prisoner even said he thought he heard multiple machine guns firing in perfect sync, said the sound made his teeth hurt. Rourke shrugged, just one gun. Milner nodded, but one gun that made them stop. The captain leaned in. You bought the division 6 hours, long enough for the engineers to lay mines and the artillery to reposition. Without that delay, they'd have retaken the high ground. Then he looked at Rourke and said something the private never expected. I'm putting you in for a Silver Star. Rourke raised an eyebrow. That thing nearly killed me. Milner stood. And that's exactly why they'll give it to you. 2 weeks later, Rourke was back at the front. He refused a rear assignment, refused desk work. He didn't want a medal or a ribbon. He wanted another gun. But something had changed. Word had spread. Men in his new unit, Fox Company, 3rd Battalion, started whispering about him before he even unpacked, called him the melted gunner. Some just called him Mad Dog. He didn't care for any of it. All he wanted was another M1917. But what they handed him was worse. An M1919A4. Air-cooled. Rourke stared at it like it had personally insulted his mother. Where's the water jacket? They phased them out for infantry squads, his platoon sergeant explained. Too heavy, not mobile enough. Rourke hefted it, feeling the balance. It was lighter, sure, but he could already see the problem. This'll melt faster. Not if you shoot in bursts. Rourke didn't answer. That night he found the armorer's tent. He asked for 2 spares of everything, barrels, bolts, even the damn tripod. He stole a medic's IV bag and filled it with water, rigging it to drip over the barrel when things got hot, taped a spare belt across his chest like a bandolier. Swales, now permanently assigned as his loader, watched it all, eyebrows raised. You're expecting another stand. Rourke looked at him. I don't expect, I prepare. July 3, 1944, Cairnton outskirts. The fog was thick, and the hedgerows felt like green coffins. Every field was a trap. Every barn might be wired. Fox Company was pinned down along a narrow farm lane, caught between a wrecked half-track and a burning hay cart. German snipers in the upper windows, MG nests at the tree line, mortars raining down from somewhere in the orchard. They were outnumbered again. And outgunned again. Lieutenant Harris was already down, shrapnel to the neck. Rourke crouched behind a stone wall, watching his new squadmates fall into panic. One man refused to move, rocking and whispering. Another screamed into the radio, begging for coordinates that wouldn't come. Then Rourke stood up. Again. In the open. Like a damn ghost of his former self. The M1919 roared. The sound was different this time, faster, higher-pitched, lighter, less menacing. But Rourke made up for it with volume. He fired in short bursts, tap, 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 but so fast and so frequent it blended into a storm. Swales was reloading before he asked. Rourke swapped barrels mid-fight, using a welding glove to avoid blistering his hand. The IV bag trick worked for a while, until a bullet ripped it open. So he dumped water by hand. Then he used coffee. Then his own spit. Again the smell rose, oil and fire, sweat and brass. The Germans tried to flank. He caught them at 3 o'clock, cut them down in a tight burst. Then at 10 o'clock, same. The air-cooled barrel glowed red. Then white. Then with a sickening creak, it bent. Not enough to break, but enough to sing. It sang like a dying animal. And still he fired. Rourke didn't think anymore. He moved like the weapon was part of him, a burnt extension of his will. He didn't even realize Fox Company had regrouped, or that the rest of the line had surged forward. He didn't realize the Germans were retreating again, not because of an order, but because of that sound. That awful, unnatural sound of metal weeping and still firing. After Cairnton, Rourke's legend hardened. They tried again to promote him. He refused. They offered him new guns. He rebuilt his own. He had 3 cooling systems now, one improvised from a stolen field sink. He filed down the triggers for smoother pull. He taught Swales to reload with his eyes closed. He was preparing for the moment when the enemy wouldn't retreat, when they'd push and push and push, and it would come down to how long one man and one gun could hold. He didn't have to wait long, because in a village called Saint-Come-du-Mont, surrounded on 3 sides, cut off from resupply, and with over 200 German soldiers advancing with armor support, it would happen again. But this time, the M1919 wouldn't melt. It would survive. Just long enough. July 6, 1944, Saint-Come-du-Mont, Normandy. Rain slicked the cobblestones as though the village had been crying all night. Overturned carts, dead cattle, shattered church spires. This was no longer a town, just the bones of one. Fox Company had been sent in to hold it for 24 hours. They lasted 11 before the first panzers appeared. By the time Rourke's M1919 was emplaced, the roads in and out were rubble. Their radio link back to Division HQ was a twisted coil of wires trailing into a crater, and the only reinforcements coming were ghosts. He knelt behind the low stone wall of a collapsed bakery, water dripping from his helmet as he surveyed the street. 3 M1s, 1 bar, 6 grenades, 2 belts of ammo, maybe 3. And 41 men left, half of them green. The rest exhausted. He felt the ground tremble first. Then came the sound, low, grinding, the unmistakable snarl of steel tracks over wet stone. A Panzer IV rolled into view at the far end of the street, its gun sweeping like a finger hunting for prey. Behind it, infantry, gray coats with bayonets already fixed, moving low in formation. And beside it, another, then another. 3 tanks. Rourke cursed under his breath. "You sure this is the best place for the gun?" Swales whispered beside him, squinting through the rain. "No," Rourke said, loading the belt. "It's the worst place." He set the tripod low, angled for a cross-lane sweep. He could catch them in the gap between buildings if they got bold. But armor wasn't scared of bullets. Unless you gave them reason to be. He scanned the rooftops. He counted sightlines, angles, escape routes. None. He tapped the barrel once. "This is it," he said. Swales didn't answer. The first shell blew apart the butcher's shop across the square. Meat hooks and tiles scattered like shrapnel. The next hit the clock tower. It folded in on itself with a moan. The Germans didn't expect resistance. So when the M1919 cracked through the rain, they paused. Just for a moment. That's all it took. Rourke stitched fire along the advancing line. Single burst, 2 men down. Another, their machine gun team collapsed before they even set up. He adjusted 3 degrees, caught the mortar team on the flank. Gone. But the tanks didn't stop. They kept grinding forward, slow and implacable, like ancient monsters in armor. Fox Company opened up in full now, rifles firing in staggered rhythm, grenades thrown like desperate prayers. A bazooka team near the chapel got one off. The rocket hit the lead panzer in the tread, staggering it. Not a kill, but a pause. Rourke fired again, burst, reload again. The barrel smoked, his glove burned. He poured water from a tin cup onto the gun, steam hissed, the rain did the rest. Swales' new belt. Click, feed, slam. The gun stuttered, then roared again. Then the second panzer fired. The blast tossed 3 men backwards like dolls. Rourke ducked but didn't stop. He aimed beneath the hull, where the belly was softer. He fired until the gun danced on the tripod. "Won't pierce it," Swales shouted over the thunder. "Don't need to," Rourke replied. "Just need to keep their heads down." Behind the tanks, the German infantry hesitated again. This wasn't supposed to be a fight. This was supposed to be a mop-up. They weren't prepared for a madman with a machine gun singing through the rain. Rourke shifted fire left, hit the alleyway where a squad tried to sneak through. 4 men down in seconds. He swung right, suppressed another group trying to flank. It was working. The tank slowed, no infantry cover. The Americans surged forward. A second bazooka shot fired. This one caught the middle tank in the engine deck. Flames bloomed. Then, silence. No one knew why. For 3 full seconds the world paused. Then came the groan. Rourke looked down. The barrel was glowing again, white-hot. Steam gushed from the cooling shroud. The mount vibrated. The air shimmered. Swales panicked. It's happening again, Rourke, it's going to melt. Then let it melt. Rourke pressed down the trigger. And kept it down. The gun didn't just fire. It howled. A continuous scream of metal, fire, and madness. The rounds slammed downrange like nails from hell, striking stone and bone alike. The ground smoked. The brick walls shattered. The Germans broke. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't doctrine. It was fear. Fear of the demon gun that didn't stop. Fear of the man behind it who didn't blink. Fear of a weapon that glowed like it had come from the forge of war itself. They retreated. One by one, then in twos, then all at once. The last tank reversed, dragging its dead comrades with it like a beast in mourning. Rourke didn't let go of the trigger until the belt ran dry. And even then his finger stayed curled. They held the town for 3 more hours, until reinforcements finally broke through the roadblock to the east. When the fresh soldiers arrived, they found Fox Company exhausted, wounded, but alive. And at the center, sitting beside a melted weapon and a pile of smoking brass, was Mason Rourke. Silent. His face blackened with soot and oil, helmet gone, eyes bloodshot, hands blistered. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The war was speaking through him. Later in the command tent, Colonel Ashford pulled Milner aside. "That's the one," he asked, pointing at the photograph of the smoking gun and its mad gunner. Milner nodded. "Rourke." Ashford exhaled slowly. "He's not like the others." "No," Milner said, "he's not. Give him what he wants." Milner blinked. "He hasn't asked for anything." Ashford lit a cigarette, leaned forward. "He will." That night Rourke sat on the edge of a field hospital cot, hands still shaking. Swales approached, holding a folded paper. "Letter from HQ," he said. "They want to name the melted M1919 after you, Rourke's Reaper." Rourke didn't smile. He looked at his hands, then at Swales, then at the pile of gear beside him. "I want the gun." Swales raised an eyebrow. "It's scrap." "I want it anyway." "Why?" Rourke's voice was hoarse. "Because it remembers." He stood, picked up his field jacket, and walked back toward the motor pool, where the next fight was already being drawn on a map. The man who fired until metal surrendered wasn't done. July 28, 1944, Operation Cobra, south of St. Lo. The earth shook for hours before the first order came. It was like the sky had snapped in half. 1,500 American bombers tearing open the clouds with their payloads, carpet bombing the German lines along a 6-mile front. The air turned orange. Trees flew upward like matchsticks. Dust thickened into paste in men's mouths. And then the tanks rolled. Hundreds of Shermans and armored half-tracks surged forward. Infantry behind them, engineers with Bangalore torpedoes clearing hedgerows, the entire weight of the U.S. First Army pivoting south. It was the breakout. The moment every man in Normandy had been waiting for. But not for Mason Rourke. He wasn't moving forward. He was going back. Behind the main front, just north of the firestorm, a German counterforce had cut off a vital supply corridor. What was supposed to be a thin screen turned out to be a heavily dug-in force, elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, fanatical holdouts with orders to stall the Americans at all costs. They had artillery, mortars, armor, and one crucial hill overlooking the entire valley below. Rourke and a ragged composite platoon of veterans and replacements were tasked with taking it. There were no headlines this time. No cheering artillery, barrages to clear the way. Just 38 men. And one gun. They moved at night. Climbing through torn earth and shattered forests, the path lit only by occasional tracer fire and burning trees from the earlier bombing. The stench of cordite hung over everything. One man vomited halfway up the slope and had to be silenced with a hand over his mouth. Rourke carried the M1919 on his back, wrapped in an oilcloth, still warped, still blackened. He refused a new one. He had spare barrels, spare mounts, but the core, the receiver, was original. The same one from Cairnton. From Hill 192. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a promise. At 3:30 hours, they reached the ridge. And stopped. Below them, floodlights. German positions dug into the hillside like a fortress. Machine gun nests staggered in overlapping arcs. Sandbags, mortar pits, and worst of all, a single road leading up, perfectly exposed. It was a kill zone. Swales lay flat beside Rourke, peering through binoculars. They've got us funneled, no cover, no air, and no armor. Rourke just nodded. Swales looked at him sideways. You're not going to do something insane again, are you? I am. Figures. Rourke stood. No helmet. Just a cloth band around his head to keep the sweat from his eyes. He took one of the barrels out of his pack. It gleamed, polished. I'm going to open the gate. The rest of the platoon stared as he moved down the ridge, slowly, silently, placing the tripod behind the broken hull of a burned-out truck halfway up the road. It wasn't cover, not really, but it blocked direct line of sight from the nearest MG nest. He mounted the M1919, loaded the first belt, whispered something to it, and waited. For 32 hours. The sky began to pale, pink and bruised from fire. That's when the Germans fired the flare. White phosphorus lit up the road like a stage. And the gun began to sing. Rourke opened with a sustained burst, sweeping the upper ridge where a machine gun nest had flared to life. The round sparked off the sandbags, and two shapes dropped backwards. The Germans hesitated. Another nest opened up higher left flank. Rourke adjusted, let loose 3 short bursts. 1, 2, 3. He saw dirt spray and limbs fly. But now they had him. Mortars began falling. Rourke didn't stop. He swapped barrels mid-fire, the metal clinking as Swales, already running ammo, dropped beside him and hissed, "You have GOT to be kidding me." "Keep feeding," Rourke shouted. The platoon surged forward behind them. The gate was open. The kill zone now had a killer of its own. Rourke shifted fire constantly, top ridge, lower flank, center trench. He could feel the gun buck against his hands, feel the shroud beginning to heat again. Water poured in, hiss, hiss, hiss. Steam clouded his vision. Mortar landed 20 feet behind him. The concussion lifted both men off the ground. Swales groaned. Rourke stood back up. Shoulder dislocated. Didn't matter. He kept firing one-handed, screaming through clenched teeth. The enemy broke formation. The machine guns went silent as their crews abandoned positions. Grenades rolled down the hill. Rifles fell still. The fear of the man with the melting gun had returned. And the Americans charged. It wasn't clean. It wasn't heroic. It was chaos. Mud, blood, screams, bayonets, boots slipping in the wet grass. And through it all, the crack and howl of Rourke's fire cutting through the hillside like a hot knife. By 5:12, the ridge was theirs. The Germans left behind 49 dead, 3 mortars, 2 anti-tank guns, and 5 untouched MG-42s. Not a single American had made it to the top without running behind the M1919. Later that day, Rourke sat alone beside the gun, barrel smoking in the dawn air, fingers blistered, trousers torn. A colonel approached, not Ashford, not Milner, a new one, face pale, clipboard in hand. "I'm here to debrief," the officer said, not unkindly. "They say what you did today, it wasn't just bravery." Rourke looked up, silent. "They say it's madness." Still no response. "But I've been reading your file." The colonel crouched beside him. "You've turned positions around 3 times now, held lines that should have broken, melted 2 machine guns, used field rations to cool a barrel. There are commanders 2 grades above you who wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes in that trench." Rourke didn't blink. "I'm not a commander." "No," the colonel said, "you're a relic." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "A relic of trench war, of belt-fed monsters and the kind of fights we're supposed to be past. The brass doesn't know what to do with you." "I don't care." "I know, that's why they're scared." The colonel stood. "They want to send you home. Rotation, you've earned it." Rourke finally spoke. "No. You're refusing." "I haven't finished." The colonel hesitated. "Then what will you take?" Rourke stood too, slung the warped M1919 over his shoulder, and said 4 words. "Give me the gun." August 18, 1944, Chambois, the Falaise pocket. The map was red with circles, pencil marks, grease smears, artillery grids, all scratched over an outline of the last great German force west of the Seine. Nearly 100,000 men, tanks, trucks, guns, now compressed into a bottleneck near the village of Chambois. The Americans and Canadians had linked from the north, the British from the west, and Patton's tanks, clawing their way up from the south, were ready to slam the trap shut. Inside the pocket, chaos. Outside it, a kill zone. No mercy, no quarter. This was where the war changed. This was where armies bled. And once again, Mason Rourke found himself placed at the hinge of history. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be rotating out, a rear assignment, a medal ceremony, maybe even a propaganda tour. But he'd burned every transfer paper they gave him, refused every ribbon, threw a bronze star into a latrine. Because medals didn't stop tanks, and heroes didn't melt steel. He was now with the 90th Infantry Division, tough hombres, hardened, blood-soaked, and stretched thin. Their objective: hold a 3-mile stretch of hill on the eastern ridge of Chambois, a last escape route for thousands of German troops trying to flee east before the pocket snapped shut. There would be no reinforcements, no air support, only what they could carry. The ground was open, rolling hills, wheat fields, and the shattered skeletons of villages burned by retreating SS units. Rourke stood beside a rusted barn, overlooking the valley. Beside him was the gun, the original receiver. Still scorched. But now rebuilt, 3 spare barrels, hand-machined by a tank crew in exchange for a bottle of bourbon. The water-cooling jacket rewelded using scraps from a wrecked Sherman's radiator. Tripod reinforced with rebar. It weighed almost 50 pounds, fully rigged. Rourke carried it like it was paper. Swale stood nearby, leaner now, quieter, eyes always scanning. They didn't talk much anymore. They didn't need to. At 600, the ridge exploded. German trucks burst from the tree line like ants from a kicked mound, dozens, then hundreds. Infantry, horses, staff cars, tanks, all roaring toward the east in one final desperate dash to escape encirclement. The Americans opened fire. Mortars, bazookas, rifle fire, chaos. Rourke didn't fire yet. He waited until he saw the motorcycles with sidecars, weaving between retreating wagons, SS officers, likely trying to organize the withdrawal. That's where the nerve was. That's where he'd strike. He mounted the gun, clamped it down, belt in, barrel tight, jacket topped off. Then he whispered, "Let's finish this." The first burst tore the sidecar clean off a motorcycle at 300 yards. The second caught a truck tire, flipping it sideways into a ditch. Infantry scattered. Horses reared. A wagon exploded as its shells cooked off, scattering black smoke across the field. And then the M1919 sang again. Longer bursts, closer now. Rourke stitched through the fleeing men like a reaper swinging steel. Every belt was pain, every round a promise. The field glowed with fire and terror. They tried to return fire. Rourke ducked, shifted position 10 feet left, fired again. Swales dropped fresh belts into his lap like a ritual. Barrel change. Dump water, keep going. His entire squad fell behind his fire, protected by it, emboldened by it. They surged down the slope, using the chaos to flank gun nests and burn out machine gun teams. The Germans began to collapse. Commanders dead. Radio trucks shredded. One Panzer tried to push through, its commander desperate. Rourke adjusted elevation. Fired low. Sparks danced across the track, not to kill it but to slow it. The infantry panicked, scattering away from its smoke. The tank became an island, unsupported. The Americans closed in with satchel charges. Gone. An hour passed. Then two. Rourke didn't stop. He rotated through every spare barrel, every drop of water they had, then canteens, then mud, then the leftover wine from a shattered French cellar. Swales even tried urine again. The jacket didn't care. It steamed, hissed, boiled, buckled, but it held. And still it fired. At 9:37 hours, the last German truck made a run for it. It got 40 feet before Rourke saw it. He fired once. Twice. The windshield turned red. The truck rolled and flipped. Done. By 1,000 hours, the firing had stopped. All of it. No more motors. No more boots. Only fire and silence. Rourke sat slumped behind the gun, hands blistered to the bone, eyes bloodshot, uniform soaked with oil, blood, and water. The barrel smoked like a chimney. The receiver hissed like a dying dragon. A general's jeep rolled up behind the line. Officers dismounted. They didn't speak at first. Just stared. Stared at the carnage. Hundreds of dead, burned-out trucks, twisted metal, boots scattered across the earth like fallen leaves. And one man still gripping the handle of a gun that should have died days ago. A captain approached. Mason Rourke. No answer. Mason Rourke. Slow nod. I'm under orders to escort you to headquarters. High Command wants to speak with you. Ike's staff. Even Montgomery's men are asking who the hell you are. Rourke stood. Unslung the gun. The captain blinked. You're bringing that. Rourke looked at him, voice gravel. She doesn't like to be left behind. August 26, 1944, Paris. The Liberation Parade marched through the Champs-Élysées. Tanks rumbled past the Arc de Triomphe. Flags waved. Girls kissed soldiers in the street. But Rourke wasn't there. He was already moving toward Belgium. He refused the medal. Again. Said the only thing that mattered was whether the gun still fired. It did. For 3 more months. In Bastogne. In Huichen. Until finally, on a frozen ridgeline near the Ardennes. During the first hours of the Battle of the Bulge, the gun gave its last breath. The receiver cracked down the middle from stress and heat. It never fired again. But it didn't need to. Because by then, the name Ruhr was being spoken in whispers from Luxembourg to the Ruhr. The Germans called him Der Höllenwerker, the Hellworker. To the Americans, he was just the Mad Gunner. A man who didn't flinch, didn't bend, and didn't stop pulling the trigger, even when his weapon began to melt in his hands. Decades later, in a museum near Fort Benning, a burned, warped M1919 sits behind glass. There's no nameplate, just a plaque that reads, "Held the line alone," and beside it in faded ink, written on a yellowing maintenance tag, "Do not repair, she already did her job."